I want to sincerely challenge you that most of the misunderstanding that we have in life is because of ill communication, miscommunication, poor communication. All right, so hear me out. So, communication is the ability to say something, then there is always a receiver. The receiver understands what has been communicated, then, of course, the receiver can give a response. Now, when there is poor communication, of course, can be in the form of text message, it can be in form of email, it can be in form of a face-to-face, it can be a video call. You know, these are all forms of communication. And I'm telling you that each channel has its own pros and cons. But one of the best thing about face-to-face communication is that we look at your body movement, your body, language. Sorry, your body language goes a long way to, facilitate what you mean and mean what you say in communication. But sometimes we might want to send a text message or a chat. Now, remember that text message and chat, they don't have body languages. So somebody can decide to read what you have typed and will interpret it any way the person wants without necessarily having to ask a question. In fact, the worst part is that somebody can read it and keep quiet without saying anything, then assume, oh Lord have mercy, that's the worst part. Assume that this is what you actually mean and start acting upon it, and you start having communication problems. So you now see the person the next day, you discover that you people are not talking because of what you said and because of how the person interpreted it. You are not even there to, you know, answer or explain. The person has already. So that's why most of the time, what you want to write in message, based on message or text something, is better you have a face-to-face communication. Sometimes when it becomes pretty urgent, you can actually send a message in terms of text or in terms of chat. So this is a problem, and this problem does not even exclude even at home, even between husband and wife, between spouses, between people that are cutting and all that. So the question is that how do we improve our communication gap? How do we improve our communication style? Now, especially from the side of the females, if you can work on the issue of assumption, you assume something even before your spouse is speaking, the lady is already having some things she want to say. So at that point, she is not necessarily listening to the husband, but she wants to say what is in her mind. And at the end of it, that's not communication. So the act of listening becomes central when we're talking about communication. Are you listening to what the individual is saying? So your husband is saying something and we are listening to the words. That means listening means you are not exchanging words. Somebody said, and I'm quoting it here, that when you hear spouses they are shouting, it means that there is no communication and they cannot hear each other. Remember that when you are shouting, it means that you cannot hear. So you have to shout so that the individual can hear you. So the shouting is because there is no communication anymore. They cannot hear each other. They cannot understand each other. So they are shouting so they can hear each other. Imagine, So now, how will one listen? Listening is an act, A-R-T, an act whereby, especially for females, I keep saying this, we want to listen. Someone is saying something, your spouse is saying something, your husband is saying something, you are listening to know where it's coming from. Then after that, you want to say what you want to say, and your husband will also listen to know what you want to say. This is pure communication. Where there is a problem, somebody is already, especially when one party is already hot. So the other party is not listening. The other party just want to say something. You want to say something. And especially when someone is saying something from the point where the person is hot, it becomes difficult to control emotions. And when emotions cannot be controlled, there's already a breakdown in communication because this individual is not handling emotions well. So he brings in emotion, pour it into miscommunication, then there will be an outburst. So the point is this: How come two individuals that say, oh, I love each other, we are this, we are that, you are my everything, they are moving well, all of a sudden there's a problem with communication? It's either along the line, one of them, either the male or the female, has stopped communicating and the other person has stopped listening. You see that? So at every point in time, somebody is speaking and another person is listening. So after listening, another person receives what is being said, interprets it, and react to what is being said. So this is pure communication. Now, with this, it's difficult to have a communication gap. You're going to have a communication gap, all right? So when you look at the problems most of the time in homes or between spouses, it is this issue of communication problems, all right? Yeah. So the point is this. So how do we manage our communication, issues in our relationship? First of all is intentionality. So when we are intentional about what we want to say, and we know that we also want to be listened to, and we also want somebody to say something to us, and we also want a situation whereby our body language is good in such a way that we are communicating positives while we are talking, then it becomes easier to understand and to make sense. All right. And of course, remember that the worst enemy we have is self. Self is even worse than the devil, because self is